Right. So what's interesting, I think, about Tuesdays is they're marketing it as Super Night. So we have Superman and Lois, and then we have Gotham Knights, and we're going from like wholesome but very like gritty when it comes to the action, when it comes to Superman and Lois, and then with Gotham Knights, it's like, oh no, there is no wholesome. We're it's Gotham.
They're like, we got no time for that. Um, and then it's interesting watching Gotham Knights back now and seeing the response to it because we kind of had a this is better than I would expecting it to be kind of consensus. And it feels like the audience has kind of felt the same way. So happy for Gotham Knights. And it also performed very well in the ratings. So things are going its way for now. And I'm happy about that. But it's an interesting pilot episode now, especially having this is my third time watching it, especially watching it when you know when the beats are coming. Because like even before I watched the first episode, I felt like I knew it because every CW show has that trailer that literally is just the pilot in 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And so technically I've seen the pilot 4 times. Um, but it's interesting. I feel like it's such a familiar story. And looking back on it now, I think the show has even more potential. I just think the pilot had to go through the motions to get there. And I'm more excited to see where the story goes next now that we've done that. But I keep saying interesting. I cannot put my finger on why I find it so interesting. There are some wonderful moments in there. There are some great storylines in there, but I'm almost happy it's done so we can move on to the rest of the show now. But generally, I still just want to say that I think this show has so much potential and I really enjoyed the pilot a lot more than I thought I would.
That has been the reaction for a lot of people, which is good. I mean, it's nice to see folks who were on the fence about it give it a chance and actually come out watching it, wanting to see more. I think a lot of it has to do with how in your face the pilot gets once it actually gets rolling. I mean, it is very brutal.
Hmm.
It is, and so you do have like creepy moments between the teens, but then you also have the horror of Bruce's murder. Like it's not just that he was killed; this man was thrown from a building, and
Hmm.
like the like it's just, and he has the mask half on his face, like there's blood everywhere on the sidewalk, and the idea that someone would frame teenagers and not just some scrappy kids who are trying to make it on the streets, like also his adoptive son. Like they someone truly planned this to the T. And it is just, I think the potential is in the mystery around why someone do this and why they would choose these kids.
Mm. Yeah, it's the perfect setup. But I do have to say, I don't think the GCPD is very bright. This is why they
No.
needed Batman in the first place, because ain't no way the Batman is getting killed by a bunch of teenagers, regardless of who their parents are. But I mean, like, credit to the Court of Owls, and we will get into them, but credit to the Court of Owls for concocting the perfect setup because we get to learn so much about the kids quite quickly, and all of them are so different because you have like the Joker's daughter and Duella, then you have Harper and Cullen Rowe, who are comic book characters, even if they're not as famous of comic book characters, and then you of course you have Bruce Wayne's adopted son Turner, who's more of an original character. He is an original character, and I know some people weren't happy that when you have an ensemble full of comic book characters, your lead is an OC. I have issues with that after my Arrow days have scarred me. But I think it works. I think it works quite well. And the setup that we brought, we were first met Carrie Kelly in the opening, and then we didn't really see her much again, other than when she left the rose on Batman's casket. We then meet her again at the end, and we find out that she was actually Robin. Such a unique interpretation, but I know we were most excited about Carrie Kelly coming into the show, and I think she could be the most interesting character of them all. She's fun, she's quirky, and that's everything a Robin should be. She doesn't have the yellow and red outfit, so we're going in a completely different tone here. Gotham Knights doesn't do color; it's completely like dark and grim, but like I feel like this could work. This is a I'm interested to see where this goes. It's a very original Elseworld story, and if you can take the canon out of it, I think you'll enjoy the show a lot more. Um, I like Turner. I don't think he had an awful lot to work with in the first episode because we jumped over all the grief. Again, the pilot just kind of went through the motions. But now that that's out of the way, I think it could be an interesting dynamic because he has all these like cartoonish characters around him. Carrie Kelly, who he might like, Stephanie, who he might like helping him on the bat computer, and then him, a very like uh prim and proper kind of student who likes life. as it was and doesn't know how to deal with all this dark and gritty crime fighting stuff. I think what you've got there is a genius concept. I just don't think the pilot got the time to tell that story. So I think going forward, we really could have some amazing episodes if the show lives up to its potential.
Yeah, I think so, especially because when you take into context Turner's life, like there's a really great moment when he uses his one phone call to call Stephanie and he
Mm-hmm.
asks for her help. And he says, you know, that they are friends because she's the one who recognized that in order to be adopted by Bruce, both of his parents had to die. And so now where he's in a situation in which he's lost another parent and he's an orphan yet again. So I think that'll be interesting how they play with that, especially juxtaposed to the kids he's running with. Because the Rose siblings, their father is absolutely horrible. And
Mm-hmm.
they needed to get out of that household. And then you have Duella, who grew up in Arkham Asylum, who is very aware of how things went down between her parents. So she's messed up. Like, so the it's just it would be, I want to know, and I had said I wasn't going to continue watching, but we'll see if I end up on episode 2 after all. But I want to know when they actually have time to sit down, whether or not the other kids are going to pick at Turner's complicated feelings about being adopted, because they, in their minds, you got adopted by the richest man in a lot of places. Actually, it's not just Gotham. So, and to have a problem with that, they would be like, what's your issue? You know, like
Mm-hmm.
you were taken care of, you were dropped at the best of schools, presumably, though it's not quite clear Bruce was around.
Mm.
So he had guardianship and they had nothing. So I do want to see how that dynamic works when we're talking about kids who have rough upbringings versus a kid who had a tragic beginning, but some would say won the lottery by being
Mm-hmm.
selected by Bruce.
It's very interesting because at the end of the day, on paper, Turner did have a life of comfort, but he was adopted into that life of comfort after suffering the worst tragedy of all. So, you know, that should not be downplayed. But at the end of the day, a lot of people who didn't live that life of comfort would understandably be like, no, you had the best life you could ever hope for. But like Turner said on the phone to Stephanie, in order to gain a new parent, he had to lose two before that. So you can't, of course, you can completely understand where he's coming from. And I thought it was very effective in the start when he said he thought his father was coming to, it was in his fencing competition. He thought he was going to
Mhm.
be there. And Stephanie said he probably had to work late. That was a double entendre because it could have meant two things. One, Bruce was a deadbeat dad who never showed up to things and always had to work late. Or two, Batman's busy. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But it was the third one that no one saw coming. Bruce and Batman are dead. So that was a very effective introduction. We knew there was more to that story with that one line of dialogue. And then in the phone call between Turner and Stephanie, you find that out a lot more. Um, I think Stephanie and Turner's relationship could be the most interesting thing about Turner because that's where he can be himself with.
Mhm.
And I hope we get to see more of that. But also, he really seems to get on with Carrie Kelly. So, and she knows a side of Bruce and Batman that he didn't. So that could be great as well. I think there's so much potential. But I will say one of the dynamics I'm looking most forward to is his kind of like unusual kinship with Duella. They're
Yeah.
so opposite. One being Batman's son, one being the Joker's daughter, and her being so like slightly unhinged, but she has a plan, and Turner being a lot more hinged, but he doesn't have a plan. So the two of them are completely like two sides of the same coin. And I really, really like that kind of unusual spark between them. She was like, "You almost got us killed." And he was like, "You're right, I'm sorry." But then she like hits him and was like, "Apology accepted." I really like that. So I hope we get to see more of that going forward. I think there's so much potential with Turner. I just think because the pilot had to go through the motions, we never really got to see any of it. And I hope we get to see it going forward. I keep saying going forward because Gotham Knights as a show excites me a lot more than the pilot actually did,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I think it's because the pilots have to do a lot of work. I think that
Mm-hmm.
is why for some shows you do actually have to watch past the pilot. That there are some incredible pilots out there. I think Gotham Knights was decent. They had a lot
Mm-hmm.
of legwork to do, and it really isn't until towards the end of the episode that you really get to see where the show could go. The group of kids seem like they're going to be the best part
Yeah.
of what the show is, and of course they should be because it is an ensemble cast and they are the leads. But I wish that the Harvey Dent stuff was better. I'm not quite convinced with Misha Collins' interpretation of Harvey Dent just yet. He just seems like a suit, right? A suit with nice coats. It's just nothing
Mhm.
there yet that's giving me what I wanted. Like he's not. I always feel like the first face of Harvey Dent, before he becomes the villain, he's supposed to be a politician that you believe in.
Mhm.
Like, well, in this case, he's the DA, but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, totally.
And he's just he didn't give that to me. I didn't feel reassured by him. I didn't feel like he commands the attention that you would think his character would, or the authority of it.
Mhm.
He did come off in that one moment where I believe that's Cullen, where he dismisses the detective because the detective is being transphobic, and
Mhm.
Harvey's not going to let that stand. So I like that the compassionate side was there. Same with when he was trying to say Robert Turner kill his father. Like I'm basically that kid's uncle. He would not do this.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you've seen The Dark Knight, you know how much the slogan "We believe in Harvey Dent" carries in Gotham. It's an important thing, and we as viewers have to believe in Harvey Dent. And I do feel that, like when he was on screen with Turner, we got that, and when he was standing up for Colin, we got that as well. But again, I think that going through the motions of the pilot kind of worked against him in the end because Batman the Animated Series did a good thing where Two-Face or Harvey had a darkness within, and it was only when he got like burnt and the accident happened that the other face came out, that other personality could thrive. So he was struggling with two personalities. I think that's what Gotham Knights is going for, but they kind of got there in a very basic kind of way that undid all the character work they did with Harvey Dent, because
Mhm.
suddenly one shitty politician woman was able to make him turn his back on his entire family. And I didn't like that. I think in hindsight, the promo for what's coming up in the season makes it stand up better, because we do see that shot of Harvey smashing the mirror and half of the mirror is all distorted, showing that Two-Face is coming, but he's already in here mentally. And I
Mhm.
think if we'd gotten a bit more of that in the pilot, it would have held up better. But right now, it made him look a bit one-dimensional, and then he turned his back on his family just so that could become the mayor. It works if you know the story, but the whole point of a pilot is that you don't know the story going in. So I feel like it kind of let him down from that front. I don't get that we believe in Harvey Dent. I do get that he's a good person on one side and then he's struggling with his demons, but I have decades of comic book knowledge to back that up. I don't know if the average viewer would. So I agree. I don't know if we needed the whole Harvey heel turn this quickly. But again, I assume that woman whispering sweet nothings in his ear is part of the Court of Owls and that they're pulling the strings. It makes sense from that standpoint, but I still think Harvey Dent is a stronger judge of character and should have taken a little bit more before he swung on the opposite "we're going to hunt these kids down" direction.
Yeah, I want them to twist his arm more. Like I want it
Mm-hmm.
to be like a difficult turn. And we just did not get that in the pilot. But the thing about sophomore episode, like the second episode, is we do tend to slow down. So perhaps
Mm-hmm.
that is what we will sort of recalibrate that interaction for Harvey in episode two. But I think, how did you feel about the Court of Owls reveal? Because I thought it was one of the best parts of the pilot. I feel like they landed, like they stuck their landing about making it creepy. Like I
Mm-hmm.
felt very uncomfortable. And even if you have like a basic knowledge of what could happen to these kids, it's just like, oh, maybe put the coin back. Put it back and don't look you any further into this.
I watched this episode about a month or two before it aired, and I'm kind of annoyed that I accidentally watched a trailer for the episode right before I did it because it spoiled the Court of Owls reveal. I have to say, if you didn't know going in, that was an excellent reveal. It built up to it nicely. And you thought that, was it Cullen who swiped the watch, was just like, here's a souvenir. And then you saw the owl on it. They were building up to it really, really well. And the fact that someone as unhinged as the Joker's daughter, like Duella, suddenly became serious and like the most logical of the group, it was like, we can't do this any further. They should have just killed us. That was very effective because Duella doesn't fear anything. She had a gun pointed in front of her and didn't care. Whereas now, suddenly, she's completely fearful of what the Court of Owls are capable of. Excellent reveal. Also, I'm not a graphic person, so I don't think I didn't love the ending, but the whole point is it was very effective, and I think that was the whole point, was that we weren't supposed to love it. It ended very abruptly, just like that poor man's life. But
Mhm.
so, like, I think it was The Court of Owls, again, to use what I said about Superman and Lois and Bruno Mannheim, is not to be trifled with. And these kids have found themselves in the crosshairs through no fault of their own. All they are doing is trying to survive, and they have become the biggest thorn in the Court of Owls side since Batman. And we know how that turned out for Batman. So how do these kids survive? I do think that was a very effective build-up, and I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with throughout the season. And the Court of Owls is adapted on TV quite a bit. I think Gotham did them as well, but we
Mhm.
never actually get to see them in like the movies or the animated shows. So they're still very much untouched in that sense. So I can't wait to see what Gotham Knights does with them, because they're still relatively new villains to the overall mainstream Batman audience. I'm sure comic book villains are more familiar with them, but I mean, they've such a scope here to work with. They can do whatever they've liked. They've already committed the biggest sin in Batman stories, which is killing off Batman. So I mean, like, we have a clean slate here. The Court of Owls, I think, could be an incredible villain for this season, and I'm glad they've opted for a non-mainstream famous one, while
Mhm.
also telling the origins of Two-Face, which is a more mainstream famous one. So Gotham Knights has a lot to work with, and I'm just going to keep harping on about how excited I am about where the story could go.
And you're not alone. Like, again, to reiterate that people are just really, I appreciate that people have decided to give it a chance.
Me too.
And it's actually made me want to watch episode two. I
Uh,
think, I mean, between our like spoiler free review that we did and then seeing the response from people who are casual, like Batman fans, to people who actually really partake in a lot of Batman stories, that there is a middle ground where everyone's like, you know what? Let's have some fun. Like I think that that's really good for this show, and I think that if it's given more time, I'm hopefully not 6 episodes worth of time. Like it really shouldn't be like the middle of the season that it picks up, but it could be a fun ride, and I don't think I want to miss out on it.
I'm glad you said that, and I agree. You know how critical I was off the first trailer, but I have to say every other trailer that shows some of what's coming up in the season looks like so much fun. And I think as this team of teenagers gets together and actually establishes themselves as the Gotham Knights, it'll get a lot more fun, because Gotham Knights is what this show is all about. It's literally in the title. So I think as when they become the Gotham Knights and start doing like standalone adventures while also trying to clear their name, I think that's when the show will find its footing, and I hope it does it quickly, because, like I said, great concept, and I hope the execution of it lives up to that.
Fingers crossed.
Manifesting it.
Yes, manifesting.